Good afternoon. I'm excited to be sharing some information on a topic that continues to accelerate and shows no sign of slowing down. When I started as a brand assistant at Clorox in 1986, I would not have thought that Clorox had to take political sides. I would not have thought that that brands had to live up to the kinds of expectations that they now have to live up to. And the truth of the matter is, purpose-led brands are winning over consumers, and they're requiring companies to think very differently about how they move forward on every aspect of business. Belief is now a path to purchase, and the majority of consumers are buying with social, political issues in mind. The great turnover is that societal leadership is now a core function of business. This goes beyond having a CSR program, having an ESG program. We're going to dive into some of the issues and how far this has gone. I'd like to share some just in research from Edelman. Edelman is a global communications firm which has executed in this area over 10 years of research. They go to 28 countries, they talk to 36,000 people, and this research, and I've just picked a few slides to share with you, these were questions that came from this last November. So let's dive into the first finding. Brands are expected to be advocates and activists. 86% of consumers expect brands to take actions beyond their product and business. What does that mean? That means charity, that means societal changes like global warming, that means communities that they're in, that means culture and arts. It's a very broad definition. 2/3 of consumers also believe they have the power to force brands to change. This balance of power has been evident, and we've seen it over the last couple of years, right? Washington Redskins just made an announcement this week of their new name, which was finally forced because of consumers. Last year, we had Aunt Jemima go away. We had Uncle Ben's go away. We had Eskimo Pie go away. They're not wrong. Consumers do have the power to force brands to change. This week, we're hearing about issues related to stuff like Spotify and the Joe Rogan podcast. And it is going to be very interesting as platforms think about having to take a side or not, right? I think the other thing to keep in mind, though, is that brands taking a stand is a better risk than not taking a stand. Not taking a stand makes you irrelevant. Taking a stand does increase the likelihood that a consumer is going to want to purchase your product or service. And here you can just see a number of examples. I'll just pick one out here, climate change. So 52% more likely to buy a brand that is addressing climate change in its product, in its marketing, than not. Another element that has changed is the speed at which customers are expecting CEOs and executives to move. 18% said within hours of an issue, 54% within 2 to 3 days, and 51% are expecting CEOs to publicly speak out when an event takes place. I will give you an example. 2 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal had and the New York Times had a full-page ad calling out the CEO of Walmart, the CEO of Coca-Cola, the CEO of Citigroup, all to talk about the John Lewis Voting Act that was in Congress to be voted on that day. So the movement is very fast. After Parkland shooting, within 48 hours, Delta and a number of other brands had erased their NRA discounts. So within 48 hours. So this is something that as you're making investments, as your teams are running brands, they really have to be thinking about and being on the watch for. What's really happened, the why, is that the 4 pillars that people look to understand their world, their government, media, NGOs, and business. Business is now seen as the only ethical player. It's a complete flip from 20 years ago. Business was the one that was unethical because they were trying to sell you something. Now people are actually looking to businesses to be leaders in all of these areas. All right, so quickly, I'm going to say, what does this mean? It means emotion trumps data. It means that as you think about the companies you're investing in, as you're thinking about the companies you're managing, you can't forget that this is how consumers are seeing it. There are brands they like, and there are brands like them. And they are loyal and provide brand love to the brands like them. So when I was in business school, we learned about point of difference. I'm teaching business school now, and I'm teaching a point of view, not point of difference. When I was in business school, we were learning about ads. Now people are learning about actions, right? So it is a very active environment that folks are involved in. Another thing to keep in mind is we all have become very familiar with ESG rating cards, and what does that mean? Environment, society, governance. These 3 letters mean nothing to consumers. Consumers are thinking about things like mental health. They're expecting you to say, how should I participate in the metaverse? They were worried about women's rights as it related to Time's Up. Now they're worried about women's rights as it relates to abortion laws. So you have companies like Lyft and Uber standing up and saying, we'll pay for an employee to move out of Texas if you don't believe in those new laws. So you have to think as broad as possible about being a societal stand, where do you stand, right? I'm just going to go very quickly because I know we're running short on a couple of quick issues. Nike decided to, as you know, a year and a half ago, pick Colin Kaepernick as the face of their 30th anniversary campaign. Colin, as everybody knows, was taking a knee starting in 2016 to protest racial injustice. I can say, having been a chief marketing officer at the NFL in my past, this was very antithetical for the NFL because the NFL is about team, not individual. There was quite a ruckus when Nike chose to put Colin on as the face of their campaign. But the result was a 10% increase in sales and a 7.2% increase in the stock price, leading to a $6 billion increase in the company overall value. So you're not going to make everybody happy, but you have to decide, what does your brand or business stand for? Just a few other examples. We're going to see a lot more of this protest fashion. This is a designer that is globally selling protest fashion T-shirts for $195 and making quite a killing doing it. But it's not because of the revenue, it's because the consumers want to badge with what they believe. Just a few examples of the thousands from last year with Black Lives Matters. Consumers are expecting you not to just virtue signal, right? With a blacked out Instagram post for a day. They're expecting real movement. A couple of examples: Sephora dedicated 15% of its shelf space to Black owned beauty brands, right? YouTube pledged 1 million to the Center for Policing Equity. Glossier did the same thing, supported racial justice, and also donated to Black owned beauty brands. The key lesson here is it's not about signaling to it's about changing behaviors. I think a long-standing example that's gone now for almost 20 years is the Dove Real Beauty campaign. To put it succinctly, Dove started featuring real women, real sizes, real faces, real bodies. Back in 2004, they got a lot of pushback, especially from their global markets. But women said, yes, that's me. That's a brand I like. The result was a jump from 2.5 billion to 4 billion in the first 10 years of the campaign. Dove bars are still the preferred soap and the #1 selling product for Unilever. I think the key about Tom's, and everybody's familiar with Tom's shoes, is not necessarily his success, although he did at his height have a revenue of over $680 million annually, but he changed what consumers expect you to do. Oh, I'll buy a shoe from him and he's going to give a shoe. So they're expecting you to be partners with them as they live their life in a way that matches their beliefs. Sustainability, known supply is just one of a host of new products that is focused on radical transparency. Everlane, Pact, known supply. The consumer wants to now know who made my clothing. Where did the product come from? How much did you pay them? They are intricately involved in so many more decisions than they were in the past. So I mentioned at the beginning the consumer. There are brands I like, and then there are brands like me. But 2 more circles have been added now. The consumer is expecting this advocacy, but now employees are expecting this advocacy. When I talk to MBA students at the University of Wisconsin and say, where do you want to work? 201 of them, they say, I want to go to work somewhere that makes a difference. I want to go to work for a place that is mission focused. So if you want to win the war for talent, you also have to understand what kind of stand you should be taking and what editorial authority you have. Finally, of course, and I don't need to tell you all this, capital markets are investing as well on their beliefs and their values.